everyone, Lane Nordland along with Russell Nimitz with the Western Ag Network, and we are on the road this week in Orlando, Florida for the Commodity Classic 2023, and we are here on the trade show floor. And Russell, it's impressive. Acres upon acres of all things farming and implements and new technology. Yeah. And of course, you got farmers from across the nation, whether that wheat growers, sorghum growers, corn, soybeans, and equipment manufacturers. There's people from all backgrounds, all crops. It's exciting just to sit down and talk with them.
It is so fun to see these farmers and ranchers, Lane. I mean, there's lots of little kids running around here too, but the older men and women, they almost become little kids again themselves. Yeah. They're climbing on this new equipment. They're having that opportunity to visit with these agribusiness leaders about the latest and greatest in ag products, technology, and services here at the Commodity Classic Trade Show.
And one thing about it too, we're also having those annual meetings of so many of these commodity groups as well. So we've caught up, and we're going to continue to catch up with so many of these outstanding men and women that are helping elevate their commodity organizations to the future.
Yeah, in fact, some of the leaders we're going to be showcasing in some of these reports. Nicole Berg, the president of the National Association of Wheat Growers out of Washington State. I attended the National Wheat Foundation's wheat yield contest reception here in Orlando. Fun opportunity to catch up with wheat growers from across the nation who are doing their best, even despite some challenges from Mother Nature, to still raise a high quality, high yielding wheat product, not just for consumers here at home, but of course around the world.
Well, again, we're going to have more of these conversations from here on the road, here on the Western Ag Network. Let's share some of those talks.
Well, as we continue our coverage from here in Orlando, Florida, and of course we're taking in a lot this week here in the Sunshine State, we have the Commodity Classic, which of course is bringing in thousands and thousands of corn and soybeans, sorghum and wheat farmers, but we've also had some hog producers here in Orlando with us as part of the National Pork Forum. But for this interview, it's a pleasure to bring home to everybody the immediate past president of the National Association of Wheat Growers from Washington State, Nicole Berg. And truly, Nicole, for the past year, you've served America's wheat industry in the president's role. You're just the immediate past president, just as of this morning, as of this interview. Just talk about what this past year has been like.
Oh gosh, Russell, this past year has been amazing. I have testified in front of the House Ag Committee 3 times. I've had to deal with the Russian-Ukraine war going on and how it affects the wheat industry and the uncertainty we all felt during the industry. And so it's just been an amazing time. And then we talk Farm Bill. Farm Bill priorities. We've tried to craft the Farm Bill priorities. We did send out a 4 corners Farm Bill to the House and the Senate side. We were one of the first ones to do it. And so, yeah, we're looking forward to Farm Bill harvest coming up.
That's right. Well, we're going to talk about each one of those items that Nicole just mentioned, but I want to talk a little bit more about you yourself, because you're only the second female president in the history of the National Association of Wheat Growers. And it really is interesting because the first female president was also from Washington State.
I know, isn't that great? We're like trailblazers in the West, right? I mean, maybe because we had to move out west and we had to go so far. But yes, no, it's been an amazing feat that I was even elected to be president, and a true honor.
Of course, that was Janet Olson. Have you had the opportunity to meet Janet?
Absolutely.
Her family, and kind of like, was she one of your heroes then growing up?
She was. She actually worked for Senator Murray's office for years and years when I first started going into the wheat growers and was on the state board. And she just kind of was one of those people that kind of you look up to and mentor about it. And then she became FSA director as well and was appointed to that position. So I know her very well. And she actually said if I had the opportunity to do it, I needed to do it.
Yeah, perfect. So before we start talking about some of these big policy issues, I mean, what actually spurred the interest to become a leader first at the state level, and then of course move on through the NOG chairs and ultimately become president?
Well, you know what really got me started was I was looking at our dryland farm, and that I farm with my dad and my 2 brothers, and we kind of have all our departments, otherwise we'd probably kill each other. And so with that, I have the dryland wheat area, and I was looking at my profit and loss, and I said, I need to have some say in these programs. I need to have some say to keep this family farm afloat, because we are dependent on the government as farmers, because we're price takers, as everybody knows, or most folks know. And so with that being said, I wanted to have a say in it. And so going up through the ranks, my mom wanted me to do this because she's like, get off the farm, you're divorced, go do something with yourself. And so that's what, now I'm here.
Oh, that's how a lot of farm and ranch families are these days, and we're very tickled that you took her advice and you implemented her plan for you. Well, let's talk about what's gone on in the industry in the past year under your tenure, I guess, as NOG president. You're not quite off the hook yet because you still have some responsibilities as the immediate past, if nothing else, keeping the new leadership in tow, right? Mm-hmm. But let's talk about, I mean, what it's been like this past year. I mean, obviously, you mentioned it before, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine that just became truly the worldwide headline that impacted wheat farmers specifically.
Oh, it impacted us because we were on a roller coaster with wheat prices, limit up, limit down. Then you get into the input side of fertilizers, just going tripling in input costs, fertilizer, fuel, all that. It's been amazing what a conflict like that can do to the wheat industry and how we truly are a global market, but it really magnified the fact we're a global market.
What was it like to testify all those times in front of members of Congress and tell the story of American agriculture, to tell the story of the American wheat farmer like yourself?
I felt it was a true honor to tell my story, especially for the wheat industry. We are very unique. 70% of wheat is winter wheat across the country. And it was interesting saying, well, this area is too wet and this area is too dry, and trying to tell that story and communicate it to Congress was an amazing honor. And I appreciated being asked in the first place. But it is somewhat like a game show, it felt like, because you only get 5 minutes to say your piece, and then you get 5 minutes to respond to a member, but then they get to present the question, and you only get maybe a minute to answer. So it was kind of like a game show, I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is. It's almost like a reoccurring nightmare in some cases too, because you got to tell your story over and over and over again. Then we have an election, and then we got to start over with a lot of new faces. But wonderful opportunity for, volunteer leaders like yourself to present the story of American agriculture. Talk about the Farm Bill. I mean, that's a big, big topic here at the Commodity Classic here in Orlando. I mean, what are the key points in the Farm Bill as discussion begins in Congress about the 2023 version?
Well, Russell, I think you brought up the perfect example of what is the most important thing to do for the Farm Bill is to go out to Congress and tell your story. You have to do it. We all as agriculture have to pull together. We got to get into Congress and start telling our story. Some of our priorities are crop insurance. We also want to see the reference price increased. We talk about voluntary incentive-based programs. We like to keep them voluntary incentive-based. We don't want to see conservation attached to crop insurance. What are some of the other ones? They are crop protection products. Yep. First time forever that I've been around farm policy that the protection of crop protection products is in our top 10.
Well, I know as you guys kicked off your meetings here in Orlando, you actually had the NRCS chief, Terry Cosby, present to you guys and talk about the important role that wheat farmers like yourself are playing in conservation, because we're going to talk about crop insurance a little bit more, but when we talk about conservation, climate, sustainability are like three buzzwords that those outside of agriculture are really keen in on from their food and fiber producers.
They absolutely are keen in on it. And it's actually globally, they're keen in on it. Where you talk to the EU or different areas of the world, we have to be able to tell our story again with regard to some of the great practices we've done across the country. 65% of the country in wheat is direct seed. And so we transitioned into these conservation practices. And so we got to get out there and tell our story better. And we are doing a lot of good things.
We are. And let's talk a little bit more about crop insurance, because a lot of folks don't realize just how important that is to have that risk management tool available to wheat producers specifically. We do our best in all different areas, but one thing that we can't control is Mother Nature, right?
Correct. I farm in a 6-inch rainfall, and I was told by professors at Washington State University that I'm in the driest area in the world that grows soy grains. And I think my great grandparents were probably asleep, like when they came through Montana and stuff. They must have been. So with that being said, I'm in the driest area. I have to have crop insurance, and the crop insurance safety net I feel is a little bit wider, especially when you see the ad hoc that we've been dealing with over the last couple of years. Well, then what's wrong with crop insurance? So let's have that conversation to make sure that the safety net is not these big gaping holes. Let's make those holes a little bit smaller for us farmers to stay in business, and especially the family farms across the country.
What a lot of folks don't realize too is like when, when farmers are given the opportunity to have crop insurance and other risk management tools, it's not so much about subsidizing the America food producer. If consumers allow themselves to take a step back, they're actually being subsidized so they can still have a safe, affordable, and abundant food supply, right?
Absolutely, and safe. We have the safest food system in the whole world, and quality, tasty food. And all that is all rolled together, and crop insurance helps those family farms, all of us family farms across the country, stay in business.
I know you got other meetings to get to. I just want to touch on a couple other things. We've been talking about a lot of policy stuff, but I know that you provided input to members of Congress as well to, make sure that trade promotion programs like FMD and MAP are properly funded moving ahead, which of course are two vitally important programs for getting this high quality wheat like you raise in Washington State to those important export markets around the world.
Absolutely. MAP and FMD funding is so essential because 50% of the wheat in the country goes overseas. So just think about that. All the wheat in the whole United States, 50% needs to have a home. And in the Pacific Northwest, it's even higher. We're 90% of the wheat goes overseas. So we have to keep our customers happy. And with the MAP and FMD, it's such a popular program. It worked. It was actually something that really, really worked. And so now all the other ag groups are coming in and trying to take that piece of the pie, and the pie gets smaller and smaller, which is great for agriculture, and I love it. But we need a bigger part of the pie so we can keep exporting overseas, and everybody has great food and safe food across the country and overseas.
And of course, the National Association of Wheat Growers works very closely with the checkoff side of the wheat business, the U.S. Wheat Associates. And between the two of you, you guys truly are representing America's wheat producers to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. We're the breadbasket.
Perfect. Nicole, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes here at Commodity Classic.
Thank you, Russell.
All right. Again, we've been visiting with Nicole Berg, the immediate past president of the National Association of Wheat Growers from Washington State.
As we come back on the road from Commodity Classic 2023 in Orlando, we are at the WestBred booth, joined by our friend from North Dakota, Peter Comis joins us in. Peter, what's it like seeing all these producers from across the nation this week here in Orlando?
It's pretty awesome. The Commodity Classic is a really big deal, so it's really cool to see all the producers and farmers and sellers come to the Commodity Classic, really celebrate their success, and then view all the different things that are out there that can really help them improve the ROI on their farm.
Well, and you talk about improving that ROI. WestBred is truly one of the most reputable organizations, companies out there, in helping producers just advance their yields, improve those crops as well. What is it like working with these producers, but also sharing that technology with them every single growing season?
Yeah, it's really fun. So I manage the North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, and a little bit in eastern Montana for WestBred wheat. And we have some varieties that sell out there, and working with these guys and seeing them improve their yields every year through the varieties that we bring. We're really trying to change the game with WestBred. We want to make sure you get the right variety on the right soil type at the right seeding population. So we want to really make sure through doing that, like how can we improve your yield by doing these techniques and using the right fertilization rate, and really with the varieties that we have, especially in western North Dakota and in the Red River Valley out east. Their yields have shot up. So, 15, 20 bushel better than the ones they've been planting. So it's been really fun to work with them. They're really into it. As you can see, all of our yield winners behind us there. There's 6 of them from North Dakota. So it's just been really fun to work with them and see what they've gone through and the improvements they've made.
Now, for our viewers and audience out there that has heard about WestBred, but maybe they haven't utilized their technology, let's talk about all the research that goes into developing these breeds.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of research. We actually have our breeder facility is out in Idaho, Filer, Idaho. And through what we do is we do a lot of local research and data collection. to where we have a technical agronomist. I have one in my region. And he has a lot of on-farm strip trials, big trials, an acre, 5 acres, 20 acres, things like that. And we work with the farmer to do these trials. We don't really go through universities. So we're doing on-the-farm trials. They're experiencing every soil type across every condition they can imagine with our varieties. So we're really giving them the best data. And it's just not one. We're doing, 20, 30, 40 a year out there to give them the best data to help them build confidence in themselves that, yeah, if I plant this wheat, this is going to be the best. And that's what we want them. We want them to have the best wheat on their farm. And that's really what we're trying to do here at WestBred.
As we talk about some of those varieties, are there any new varieties coming out, or maybe just touch upon those proven successful varieties that producers have?
So I only can speak for my region. We don't really have anything new right now. We're working on some experimental, so hopefully bring some really good ones to the market. But right now we have 4 main ones, but we'll really focus on Western North Dakota for this one. We have 3 that really work out there the best, which is WestBred 9590, WestBred 9719, and WestBred 9606. Each variety has its fit. The 9719 and 9606 are really made for that drier Western North Dakota, Eastern Montana climate. They do very well out there. As you can see from our national yield winners, those are the big ones, and they take the cake in all the Southwest and stuff like that. So those are the big ones for us in our part of the world.
Now, for our friends that are tuning in on social media or on our radio and TV programs, if they want to learn more about how they can get in touch with yourself or other reps out across the countryside with WestBred, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you want to go to westbred.com. And you can look it up. There's a map that shows there's 7 of us regional managers on there and has all our contact information, but it also has a list of everyone who's an authorized seller of WestBred. And they can look it up that way by where they live in, closest to their zip code and stuff like that.
Well, Peter, enjoy the rest of your time here in Orlando. Did you make it to ride the teacups over at
I haven't been there yet, so.
I haven't made it over there, but thank you, Peter.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Peter Comis joined us here from WestBred. We'll have more conversations from the trade show floor here at Commodity Classic 2023 throughout this week.
Well, commodity farmers aren't the only ones meeting this week here in Orlando, Florida. America's hog producers are as well. That's because the National Pork Forum is underway this week here in Orlando. Now joining us is the National Pork Producers Council President, Terry Wolters out of Pipestone, Minnesota. And Terry, the weather's a little bit different whether it's back home in Minnesota where you're from or back home in Montana where I'm from.
Absolutely. It's sunny, bright, and amazing here in Orlando.
It is. We need to bottle some up and take some back home with us for sure. But let's talk about the National Pork Forum and the idea to meet this week here in Orlando.
Yeah, so really the National Pork Forum really is it's the annual meeting of the associations. And so delegates from all across the country gather to vote on either resolutions or bylaw, discuss business amongst themselves, really issues that impact our industry, and then not to forget they elect their new board of directors and the candidates for that represent and essentially guide our industry.
Well, it takes a ton of work to be a volunteer leader like yourself, and all the men and women that are putting their names forth that will assume is just an incredible feat, and the industry is very lucky to have people like you stepping up to the plate. Obviously, there's not a lack of issues affecting the pork industry. One that I want to visit first about, though, is where are we at with Proposition 12? Because a lot of agriculture outside of the pork industry is really watching this very carefully.
Yeah, so great question. The Proposition 12, it's been a long journey. It's been since 2018 that we've been on this track. Ultimately here this past October, we were able to get in and present our case to the Supreme Court. We're expecting we could have a announcement and at any time. We're really on the clock as we speak. But ultimately, that's in the hands of the Supreme Court, and it's not, to your point, it's not only about pork. Pork's the issue of the current case, but really it's about the Dormant Commerce Clause and ultimately how states interact or do business with each other. In our view, we just feel like the ability for the state of California to regulate industry outside its borders is beyond its jurisdiction. And so ultimately we're feeling really good about our position and our case, and we look forward to their announcement.
You know, speaking of the U.S. Supreme Court, Proposition 12 isn't the only issue that's before them right now. Water, of course, is the lifeblood of every farm and ranch and rural community across America. And one that's reemerged, unfortunately, is the highly controversial waters of the U.S. rule.
That's true, and so that's again, it's added regulation to our industry. We've got a lot of concern on how that could impact our industry in a macro sense, but at the same time, pork producers in particular work very diligently to apply manure to the land, follow the rules, and regenerate the nutrients of the land. And so it's definitely top of mind for many producers.
Animal health issues are being talked about here in Orlando this week with pork producers like yourself. Two that come to mind, African swine fever and foot and mouth disease.
Yeah, so those two issues, we definitely would bundle those into foreign animal disease threats to our industry. Obviously, African swine fever is spreading wildly through the globe. There's a high impact to the entire pork industry across the nation, not the globe, not the nation, excuse me. But ultimately, we're concerned about it here in the United States because we've got it in the Dominican Republic, which is as close as it's ever been since the 70s. And that is top of mind for many pork producers, that we got to keep it off the mainland United States. So how that has impacted the global availability of pork is top of mind. Associated with foot and mouth disease, as you mentioned, that is also a greater concern from a broader perspective because it impacts beef and dairy as well as the pork industry. That's been a key focus of our farm bill asks in previous farm bills. We want to maintain our vaccine bank for foot and mouth disease. We want to maintain our diagnostic lab and our surveillance systems. We want funding to continue to protect our borders through the Beagle Brigade program that we refer to it. And it's all about having the dogs search and investigate cargo as it's coming into the nation here. And ultimately, that's our biggest threat from our perspective.
Let's talk about keeping the nation's hog herd healthy and safe. I mean, there's also some big changes headed down the pipe, so to speak, in June when things change a little bit on how producers can go in and get antibiotic prescriptions from their local veterinarians.
Yep. So it's been on our radar for many years. It really started through the food company systems about wanting to influence how antibiotics were used and which antibiotics are deemed medically important. And we don't want any cross-contamination within the human sector. And so producers are extremely judicious in how they use their antibiotics. Antibiotics are a tool to treat animals that are sick. And we work hard to do that judiciously under the guidance of a veterinarian and through animal health and welfare programs. And so we continue to illustrate that in the way we do business every day and the way we care for our animals. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, if we don't take care of our animals, they can't do the job that we need them to do, both on the farm and throughout the system.
What about ag labor issues, Terry? I mean, I'm sure that the workforce, finding willing and able men and women to help out in the hog industry is probably just as challenging as other sectors of American agriculture these days.
It absolutely is. In many cases, because the way agriculture is positioned across the country, we're often located in low populated areas. Some of that's by design, but ultimately when we do that and we locate farms away from people, we locate away from a workforce. And so we have put a lot of effort into the modernization of the Farm Labor Acts, and we're asking for H-2A visa reform from the standpoint that we would like seasonal workers to be here year-round, but ultimately we'd like to have the quota increased. We're capped on the number of workers that we have. We have lots of willing workers. We have great paying jobs in our industry, but we just have to have the opportunity to get them involved in our farms and in our labor force. And so that's been a lot of our focus with lawmakers, is to get reform into that Labor Act.
Last question. I mean, we've covered a lot during this interview, a lot of important issues impacting America's hog industry and producers like yourself. But for the consumer out there, everything that we've said, there is still a safe, delicious, affordable, and abundant pork supply in their meat case, and that makes you happy.
Absolutely. We work hard every day to provide a safe, nutritious product. We've got the most economic system in the globe to produce food for a growing world right here in the United States. We're proud of what we do every day. We care for the animals, and we're really focused on providing that product to a consumer that is really as affordable as any protein in the meat case today. But I would call out the fact that it was only too apparent during COVID that our supply chain disruption was very, very impactful, and we're concerned about that going forward, and we need to keep an emphasis and a focus on how we manage that supply chain.
Very good.
So a consumer can ultimately have what they need at the grocery store.
Absolutely, well said. Again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Again, we've been visiting with Terry Wolters, the president of the National Pork Producers Council, in Orlando with us as part of the National Pork Forum. Again, he calls Pipestone, Minnesota his home now, but he was telling me he grew up in Washington State, and for our audience back home in Big Sky Country, he was born in Great Falls of all places. Well, that's going to do it for this report from the National Pork Forum here in Orlando, Florida. Well, Lane, that's going to do it for this edition of On the Road from here at the Commodity Classic in Orlando, Florida.
Hey, and for our viewers at home that are joining us here on our social media streams, make sure and come back, subscribe to these social media channels as well. We'll have more of these conversations from On the Road throughout our week here at Commodity Classic, along with all of our programming on radio and TV. So on behalf of Russell Nimitz, I'm Lane Nordlund for the Western Ag Network.